All right, we got a North American plate here and our Juan de Fuca Plate here. Over time, the Juan de Fuca Plate subducts under the North American plate. As this happens, pressure with gases and magma build up over here where Mount Lassen is, and when enough pressure builds up, it causes an eruption.
Right now, roughly 300 miles off the coast of Oregon, something is waking up. It's been building for years. Quietly, invisibly, almost a mile beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean. Thousands of earthquakes every single day. A seafloor that has been swelling upward like a slow-motion blister, inching closer and closer to a point scientists have seen before, right before everything let loose. And that's just the volcano, because underneath the volcano, underneath the ridge it sits on, there's a tectonic plate doing something geologists have never directly observed before in human history. It's breaking apart, fragmenting, tearing itself to pieces in slow motion as it slides into the Earth's mantle. And it changes everything scientists thought they understood about the biggest seismic threat in North America. This is the story of the Juan de Fuca Ridge, a place most people have never heard of, sitting in one of the most geologically wild corners of our planet. And right now, in 2026, scientists absolutely cannot look away from it. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. What is the Juan de Fuca Ridge? Let's start with the basics, because the more you understand what this place actually is, the more extraordinary the story becomes. The Juan de Fuca Ridge is a mid-ocean ridge system stretching about 500 kilometers along the floor of the northeastern Pacific Ocean. It sits roughly 300 miles off the northwest coast of the United States, completely invisible from any shoreline, unknown to the vast majority of people who live within driving distance of it. But make no mistake, this is one of the most geologically alive and consequential places on Earth. Here's what's happening down there. The ridge marks the boundary between two tectonic plates, the enormous Pacific Plate to the west, and the much smaller Juan de Fuca Plate to the east. And those two plates are doing something fundamental. They're diverging, slowly pulling apart from each other at about 5 to 6 centimeters every year. That sounds tiny, but the consequences are enormous. As the plates separate, hot, molten rock, magma, rises up from deep inside the Earth to fill the gap. It cools and hardens into fresh oceanic crust. New seafloor, forged in real time, continuously added to the edges of both plates. The Juan de Fuca Ridge is essentially an underwater factory that has been manufacturing ocean floor for tens of millions of years. The ridge is divided into 7 distinct segments from south to north: cleft, vance, axial, coaxial, cob, endeavor, and west valley. Each one is defined by a rift valley carved 50 to 200 meters deep into the sea floor, up to 5 kilometers wide. When scientists first mapped this system using swath bathymetry, a sonar technique that paints detailed 3D pictures of the ocean floor, they were stunned by the complexity and scale of what was down there. Unlike the tectonically chaotic Gorda Ridge to the south, the Juan de Fuca Ridge is considered relatively stable in terms of earthquake generation along the ridge itself. But the plate it creates? That's a completely different story, because that plate has somewhere to go. And where it's going is directly beneath your feet if you live in Oregon, Washington, or British Columbia. We'll get to that, but first, the volcano. Chapter 2. Axial Seamount, the volcano on the edge. Sitting right at the center of the Juan de Fuca Ridge, perched on what's known as a hotspot, a plume of unusually hot mantle material punching up from deep below, is Axial Seamount, and this thing deserves its own documentary. Axial is the most active underwater volcano in the entire Pacific Northwest. It rises about 3,600 feet above the surrounding seafloor, but still sits nearly a mile below the ocean surface. Its summit holds a large caldera, a collapsed volcanic crater, roughly 3 kilometers wide and 8 kilometers long. The caldera floor is paved with fresh lava from past eruptions, layered like geological history you can walk across, if you had the right submarine. And Axial has been busy. It erupted in 1998, again in 2011, again in 2015, 3 major eruptions in less than 30 years. Over its history of roughly 800 years of recorded geological activity, it has erupted around 50 times. This is not a sleeping giant. This is an active, breathing, churning volcano that operates on a rhythm scientists are only now beginning to decode. Each past eruption followed the same signature pattern. Magma migrates upward from below, inflating the seafloor like a balloon. Seismic activity ramps up as the rock above fractures under pressure. Then, when a threshold is reached, the system releases. Lava pours across the caldera floor, the seafloor deflates, and the cycle begins again. During the 2015 eruption alone, the event triggered over 300,000 earthquakes and produced lava flows covering up to 1.4 square kilometers of ocean floor. Now fast forward to today. Scientists at Oregon State University have been watching Axial through the most sophisticated ocean observatory ever built, the Regional Cabled Array. Picture over 660 miles of fiber optic and power cables running across the seafloor, connecting more than 140 instruments, seismometers, pressure sensors, tilt meters, cameras, hydrophones, all feeding continuous, real-time data back to researchers onshore. This is the world's first underwater volcano observatory, and Axial Seamount is its star subject. What those instruments showed through 2024 and into 2025 was deeply, unmistakably familiar. The seafloor around Axial began inflating again. By mid-2025, the inflation had reached levels comparable to right before the 2015 eruption. In June 2025 alone, the volcano registered over 2,000 earthquakes in a single day. The signal was clear: magma was on the move. Bill Chadwick, a volcanologist and research professor at OSU, who has spent decades studying Axial, was direct about what he was seeing. He and colleague Scott Nooner at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington have been publishing regular updates through OSU's College of Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences. In late 2025, they noted that while the seismic rate had settled, nothing is imminent, they wrote. The inflation had not stopped. Based on the current rate of magma recharge, they now project the eruption threshold will be reached sometime in mid to late 2026. That's now. We are in that window. And here's the detail that makes this moment genuinely historic. When Axial erupts, researchers plan to live stream it. For the first time in human history, we could watch an underwater volcanic eruption happening in real time, beamed up through 660 miles of undersea cable to screens around the world. The fact that scientists have positioned their instruments so precisely that this is even possible is a testament to how seriously this ridge is being monitored. One important note before we move on: Axial Seamount poses no direct danger to coastal communities. It is too deep and too far offshore. The eruptions affect the local deep-sea ecosystem, hydrothermal vents, microbial mats, tube worms, the bizarre life forms that thrive in those extreme environments. For humans onshore, the eruption itself is not the threat, but the plate that Axial sits on, that's an entirely different conversation. Chapter 3. The plate that's breaking apart. To understand why any of this matters to the 10 million people living in the Pacific Northwest, you need to understand Cascadia. The Cascadia Subduction Zone runs for roughly 700 miles along the ocean floor, from Cape Mendocino in Northern California all the way north to the tip of Vancouver Island in Canada. It is the seam where the Juan de Fuca Plate dives beneath the North American plate, and it has been locked, completely stuck, building pressure for over 325 years. The last time Cascadia fully ruptured was January 26, 1700. A magnitude 9+ megathrust earthquake ripped along the entire fault. The shaking lasted for minutes. The resulting tsunami crossed the entire Pacific Ocean and slammed into Japan, where samurai-era scribes recorded the mysterious wave that arrived with no local earthquake to explain it. Scientists didn't piece together the full picture until centuries later, using Japanese historical records, indigenous oral histories from Pacific Northwest nations who described the ground shaking and the sea rising, and buried sediment layers in coastal marshes that recorded the land suddenly dropping. That sudden land drop is one of the most chilling aspects of the Cascadia threat. Right now, the subducting Juan de Fuca Plate is actually bowing the North American continent upward. Parts of the Pacific Northwest coast are rising slightly every year because of this compression. When the fault finally ruptures, that uplift instantly reverses. The land drops. In some coastal areas, the subsidence could be measured in meters, happening in minutes, permanently. Low-lying towns, some of them sitting barely above sea level today, could find themselves underwater for good. Research from 2025 spelled out the scenario in stark terms. A full Cascadia megathrust rupture could shake the west coast violently for 5 full minutes. Tsunami waves as tall as 100 feet, taller than a 10-story building, could strike coastal communities. And then the flooding could persist because the land itself has changed. Oregon's Department of Emergency Management has been direct with state residents. When the Cascadia event occurs, expect to be without essential services, power, water, roads, communications, for a minimum of 2 weeks, possibly much longer in coastal areas. The USGS released updated earthquake probability assessments for the Pacific Northwest in 2025, categorizing the threat into 3 types: deep intraslab earthquakes within the descending plate itself, which have historically caused significant damage in cities like Seattle and Olympia, shallow crustal earthquakes from faults on land, and the megathrust, a full rupture of the entire subduction zone. It's that last category that represents the greatest risk and the greatest uncertainty. The Juan de Fuca Ridge is the beginning of that entire chain. Every square kilometer of oceanic crust created at the ridge eventually joins the Juan de Fuca Plate. That plate travels east, loads up stress against the North American continent, and when it finally breaks free, Cascadia ruptures. Understanding the ridge, understanding Axial Seamount, understanding the fragmentation of the plate, all of it is part of the same connected system. You cannot understand the threat without understanding the source. Chapter 4. The big one. How worried should we actually be? The Cascadia Subduction Zone is one of the most feared fault systems on Earth. And for good reason. The last time it fully ruptured was January 26, 1700. A magnitude 9+ earthquake shook the entire Pacific Northwest. It triggered a tsunami so powerful, it crossed the Pacific and slammed Japan, where scribes recorded an orphan tsunami, with no local earthquake to explain it. Scientists pieced the whole story together centuries later from Japanese records, indigenous oral histories, and buried sediment layers along the Oregon and Washington coast. That was 325 years ago, and the Cascadia Subduction Zone has been silent ever since. But silent doesn't mean dormant, it means it's locked, building pressure. The Juan de Fuca Plate grinds eastward beneath North America, at a pace too slow to feel, and yet the stress accumulates relentlessly. A recent USGS fact sheet from 2025 laid out the stakes plainly. The Pacific Northwest faces 3 categories of earthquake threat from this system: deep intraslab earthquakes within the descending plate, shallow crustal earthquakes from faults on land, and the megathrust, the full rupture of the entire subduction zone. That last one, the megathrust, is what keeps scientists up at night. Research published in 2025 in NBC News described the scenario in harrowing terms. When the fault finally ruptures, it could shake the west coast violently for 5 full minutes. Tsunami waves reaching 100 feet could strike coastal communities, and perhaps most chillingly, the land itself would drop. Because right now, the subducting plate is bowing the North American continent upward. When the lock releases, that uplift reverses. Centuries of gradual rise erased in minutes. Low-lying coastal towns could suddenly find themselves permanently flooded. Oregon Emergency Management warns that when the Cascadia event happens, affected regions should expect to be without basic services for at least 2 weeks. And what does the Juan de Fuca Ridge have to do with all of this? Everything. The ridge is where the plate is born. The subduction zone is where it dies. What happens along the ridge, the spreading, the volcanic activity, the fragmentation now being observed, all of it feeds into the stress patterns that determine how and when Cascadia will rupture. Chapter 5. Why scientists can't look away. So why is this moment, right now, 2026, particularly significant. What's changed? The tools have finally caught up with the question. For most of human history, the deep ocean floor was more mysterious than the surface of the moon. We had almost no way to observe it in real time. Mid-ocean ridges were theorized before they were confirmed. Underwater volcanoes went undetected. Tectonic plates were tracked by their surface effects, not observed directly. The Regional Cabled Array changed that. Operated through the National Science Foundation's Ocean Observatories Initiative, it connects monitoring teams at Oregon State University, the University of Washington, and the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. Over 660 miles of undersea cables, more than 140 instruments, a decade-long investment in continuous, real-time ocean floor observation, and it is paying off. Because of the array, scientists caught Axial's inflation signals months before any eruption threshold was approached. They've tracked the precise timing and location of thousands of daily earthquakes, building a detailed picture of magma movement in real time. They are now testing a physics-based eruption forecasting model using this data, one that, if successful, could eventually be applied to volcanic systems around the world. And the slab fragmentation discovery? That too relied on extraordinarily detailed seismic imaging of the descending plate. The kind of data that simply didn't exist a generation ago. We are watching the machinery of the Earth work in real time, not reconstructing it afterward from rock cores. Watching it live. That's why scientists can't look away. The Juan de Fuca system is giving them a window into processes that shape every subduction zone on the planet. Japan, Chile, Alaska, Indonesia. Understanding how this plate spreads, breaks apart, and drives a megathrust rupture could help forecast catastrophes worldwide. The ocean floor beneath the Pacific Northwest is never truly still. It spreads and swells. It fractures and subducts and reforms. Magma rises, new crust is born, old crust is swallowed back into the mantle. On human timescales, it happens almost too slowly to perceive, and yet occasionally, in moments of eruption and earthquake and tsunami, the deep earth reminds us how thin the stable surface we've built our entire civilization on really is. The Juan de Fuca Ridge is moving. It never stopped. We just finally have the instruments to see it clearly. And what we're seeing is fascinating, humbling, and more than a little urgent. Somewhere in the coming months, Axial Seamount will erupt. Scientists are ready. Cameras are pointed. For the first time, you might watch it happen from your phone. And somewhere in the future, Cascadia will rupture. That one, we can't watch from a safe distance. If this resonated, subscribe. We cover the science unfolding right now in the places most people never look. And drop a comment. If you live on the Pacific Northwest coast, does knowing all of this change anything? See you in the next one.